from turbulence in the air to uncertainty in energy. Canada stands at a pivotal moment in its energy and economic trajectory. As one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas, the country has long relied on its vast natural resources to drive growth, create jobs, and attract global investment. But with climate change at the forefront of global policy and investor agendas, the traditional energy sector is facing mounting pressure to adapt or risk being left behind. The rise of ESG investing, coupled with the international climate commitments such as the Paris Agreement, has placed Canadian energy companies under increasing scrutiny. Investors are now demanding not only profitability, but also credible and transparent plans for decarbonization. This shift is forcing oil and gas producers to balance short-term demand with long-term sustainability. I'm now joined by Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited, to discuss this further. Brendan, thank you for the time today.
Well, good to be here for as long as we have left.
Now, how are Canadian energy companies balancing the demand for oil and gas with investor pressure for greener strategies?
Well, it's a funny one, of course, because actual investors in oil and gas companies aren't pressuring the oil and gas companies as much as people who aren't investors, be they the government or the private sector. Canadian oil and gas companies, of course, have been under tremendous pressure through the present federal government regime and the previous government as well, or even most particularly. So it's been a real challenge. I think our biggest challenge is how to make the best use of the time we have. It is reasonable and likely that there will be some sort of energy transition over our lifetimes, although hopefully you live somewhat longer than I do. But it will be, I think, a gradual transition. The idea that there won't be any more internal combustion engine cars sold in Canada in 2035 seems like very much a stretch goal now. Perhaps that it gets met, but it's very much a stretch goal. So there will continue to be fossil fuels being burned. I think the advantage for Canadian oil and gas producers is that we do actually have quite a proven supply already that just needs to be accessed, and even more importantly, have access to blue water. I think we need to consider our energy independence, both internally and independence from the United States, which may be the subject of another conversation. So, a long-winded way of saying, I think the oil and gas business is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And even as it winds down, I think there will be, a relatively strong industry, because as fewer and fewer fossil fuel producing assets are found, because there's less exploration, what is left will become more and more valuable.
And are renewables and clean tech firms in Canada positioned to deliver sustainable long-term returns for investors?
It's very much a work in progress, I think. I have had some significant renewable energy investments. We were the largest investors through Urbana Corporation in a fuel ethanol plant down in southwestern Ontario, in Aylmer, Ontario, which had been known as the Integrated Grain Processors Cooperative. We owned about 20% of that, and I was recently raked over the coals by one of my children about having a fuel ethanol plant, because it's terrible for the environment, notwithstanding it was state of the art when it was built nearly 20 years ago. So what constitutes being green is very much a work in progress. The plant's since been sold to private equity from Europe. But I think that's part of the issue, is that to the extent that we create resources or industry in Canada, we're not really in a position to take it to the next level. It's a wonderful country in which to start an enterprise, not necessarily the best one to build one, let alone be the international takeover ors. We're much more likely to be the takeover E, which I think longer term is challenging in any sort of sector. Sorry, go on.
No, but well, how should investors weigh the risks of stranded assets in fossil fuel heavy portfolios?
Well, I don't know that too many people are heavy in the fossil fuel sector, particularly not of the younger generation that have been particularly keen, and understandably so, if you really do believe that a degree and a half of global warming will make life on Earth untenable, which is a widely held view, then yeah, having one's money invested heavily in fossil fuels, probably running counter to one's long-term best interests. But as I think what I was saying earlier is that I don't think that within the next decade you're likely to find them to be stranded assets. More likely, you'll see the exploration uh, expenses go down, so the existing assets become worth more and more as the demand doesn't go down nearly as quickly as the new deposits are discovered. So I think there'll be continued demand for energy deposits to energy production in for the foreseeable future.
And what role will government policy and carbon pricing play in shaping Canada's investment opportunities?
Yeah. Well, it may shape to a great degree Canada's political opportunities. As you know, the province of Alberta has felt particularly aggrieved at the way it has been treated, or sees itself as being treated by the federal government, which every generation seems to see it somewhere between a cash cow or something to be ashamed of, while treating it as a cash cow. So there is a nascent Alberta separatist movement that, if the federal government continues to be as aggressive as it has been in uh, treating Alberta and its energy sector like it's something to be ashamed of, then you may see that grow. And we've throughout my lifetime and longer dealt with the threat of Quebec separatism, which probably peaked 30 odd years ago. But I'm not sure that Alberta separatism has yet peaked. How far it goes and whether they actually end up becoming their own republic or what have you, I think is a long shot. But I think the political stability of Canada is at least somewhat dependent on the federal government uh, treating the oil and gas business as a industry worthy of our appreciation, at least as much, if not more, than any other.
And could the energy transition strengthen or weaken Canada's competitiveness in global capital markets?
Well, very few countries that have fossil fuels have actually done well by the over reliance on them. I will give the federal government that much. I would say very few, but not. I mean, Norway has done a spectacular job of of developing a federal fund such that many things, and like they've actually created their socialist paradise out of the tremendous fossil fuel revenues they've got from the North Sea. As that asset winds down, Norway is in a much better position than it would have been half a century ago. I think with Canada we've squandered a lot of the time that we have been at the forefront of the energy business, and I think that we're not in as strong a position. So all we can do is what we have with the time we have left. So whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 5 years, I do think it'll be important for Canada to get the most out of its existing energy sector, because ultimately solar is not going to work nearly as well here. Maybe wind, maybe something else. Uranium and nuclear, I still think that's a viable option, but there are going to need to be other ways of generating power and generating revenue. We had a lot of support from the oil and gas business for a long time. We didn't make as much out of it as we could have as a country. I think we need to, in every sector of the economy, allow business to be in business without micromanaging and regulation. The government doesn't need to be the solution to every single problem.
Well, Brendan, as always, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Teresa.